This video is sponsored by Golden Lotus Studio. Whether for artistic reasons or for legal reasons, artists will sometimes cover or re-record their own songs. Sometimes they're doing this to try and recreate the original as closely as possible, but more often they're aiming to bring something new to the song, to put a new artistic twist on that song. This is exactly the case with Joni Mitchell and her classic song Both Sides Now. Joni Mitchell wrote Both Sides Now when she was only 21 years old, and her first recording of it came out on her 1969 album Clouds. This is a clip of Joni performing the song in 1970.
I've looked at clouds from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow, it's...
As you can hear, this original version is a fairly typical but beautiful folk song. A solid acoustic guitar part, supporting a solo vocal line above, and nothing much else. A very nice, sweet song with a captivating lyric. It's a great track, a great arrangement, and was and is very popular with listeners. But Joni wasn't that sure about the song, and as she got older, she started to feel like there was more that she could bring to the recording. See, the thing is, Both Sides Now is a song about thinking you know about something, to only learn later that you actually knew nothing about its true nature. Whether it be clouds, or love, or life, you think you've got it all sussed, but then later you see that thing from another perspective, another side, and you realise that you never really knew anything about it at all. And this is exactly why Joni felt like she had to re-record Both Sides Now. As she explains in this interview clip, at the age of 21, she wasn't ready to sing a song about seeing life from both sides. She needed to grow into the song.
That song, I've looked at life from both sides now. 21 when I wrote it, I took a lot of ridiculing for it. I was just miscast in it, I think, as a young girl. That I really like the performance I did in my 50s of it. In my young one, it's too young a girl to pull off that role.
So at age 56, Joni revisited Both Sides Now. The acoustic guitar accompaniment was replaced by a lush, emotive orchestral arrangement put together by Vince Mendoza, who subsequently won a Grammy for the arrangement. This beautiful arrangement, which is at a slower, freer tempo than the original, has also been transposed down a major third, placing Joni's now older voice in a deeper, warmer register.
So many things I would have done, but clouds got in my way.
The original version captures the headstrong wonder of a young person working out what life is about for the first time. But the later version offers a different side to the story, a more worn, wise and hard-earned perspective that casts a bittersweet tone over the lyric.
I really don't know clouds at
all. Thanks to these two amazing recordings, made almost 30 years apart, we get to hear both sides of Both Sides Now. John Lennon was well known for never being happy with his recordings. In fact, as you will hear in this interview clip with George Martin, John claimed that he actually wanted to re-record everything that the Beatles had ever done. And perhaps if he hadn't been tragically killed in 1980, he would have gone on to do this.
We were just rapping about old times, and he suddenly came out and he said, I'd like to do everything all over again. I said, come on, John, not everything. He said, yeah, everything. I said, you mean you don't think we ever did anything right? He said, most of what we did was crap. I said, you can't say it. What about Strawberry Fields? He looked at me and said, especially Strawberry Fields, which really floored me. But then John's dreams were always dreams. They never became reality. He always envisioned things that were more beautiful, greater, more extraordinary than anything he could possibly really realise in real life.
But even without being given the opportunity to re-record the Beatles' entire back catalogue, John's perfectionism meant that he would sometimes completely re-record Beatles songs before they even got released. If you've watched my video on Strawberry Fields Forever and its weird microtonal key centre, then you'll know that the version of the song that we know and love today is actually a spliced combination of two quite different recordings of the song, the original take and a re-recording that John requested to be made from scratch.
Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to.
But another Lennon song that went through various incarnations and was re-recorded from scratch is Revolution. The difference with Revolution, though, is that both the original version and the re-recorded version both got released. In 1968, the Beatles released 3 versions of the song Revolution. There was the version simply referred to as Revolution, which was the B-side to Hey Jude.
You want a revolution?
We also had Revolution 1, which was released on the White Album. And of course there was Revolution 9, which was also released on the White Album and, as you can hear, is a drastically transformed version of the song.
Number nine.
So how did we wind up with 3 versions of this song? Well, the first version to be recorded was actually the version we know today as Revolution 1. Referred to at the time simply as Revolution, the Beatles tried a few different takes of the song before arriving at Take 18. Take 18 was actually a 10-minute version of the song, beginning with the song as we know it, but then descending into an intense, heavy jam section for the last 5 minutes of the duration.
Right. Don't you know it's gonna be alright? Don't you know? Don't you know?
Despite liking this 10-minute jam version of the song, Lennon was also very keen to release Revolution as a single, and knew that they couldn't release a 10-minute long single. So Lennon cut the track in 2. The first 4 minutes of the track became what we now know as Revolution 1, and the remaining unused 6 minutes was used as the foundation of Lennon's experimental sound collage, Revolution 9. So that's how we got 2 versions of Revolution, but where did the third version come from? Well, as I mentioned before, Lennon was very keen to release Revolution as a single, but McCartney and Harrison argued that the track they had recorded, Revolution 1, was too slow to be a single. Adamant that the song be the band's next single, Lennon decided that they should record a faster, heavier version of Revolution from scratch, and that's how we wound up with the single version of the song, the version we know today as Revolution. And thank God that Paul and George did push John to re-record Revolution, because the version they re-recorded wound up being the version that most fans would consider the true version, despite the fact that it was recorded last. In a moment, we'll take a look at how Radiohead, on more than one occasion, have taken over a decade to record a version of a song that they're actually happy to release. But just before we do that, I want to talk to you about today's sponsor, which is Golden Lotus Studio. Golden Lotus Studio is an online community devoted to music training, education and songwriting. They offer courses in music theory, ear training, recording and producing. They also host a weekly online songwriting club every Friday at 4 PM Eastern Standard Time. At the club, you'll join fellow songwriters on a video call and work through writing your own song in just 75 minutes. Each songwriting club session is followed by a Q&A with an industry professional, and on the 20th of August, that industry professional will actually be me. If you want to catch my Q&A session or just find out more about Golden Lotus Studio, then head to goldenlotusstudio.com or click the link in the description below. You can also use coupon code DAVID to get a special discount and bonus offer. Another artist who seemingly shares Lennon's perfectionism is Radiohead. For example, you're probably familiar with Radiohead's song Nude, which was released on their 2007 album In Rainbows. But Nude was actually first recorded in 1997, during the OK Computer recording sessions. As you can hear, this early version is a bit more stripped back and features a prominent Hammond organ part. It also has different lyrics. Radiohead producer Nigel Godrich describes in this interview why Nude wound up being shelved for so long. The band liked it was deemed a great success, but then for some reason everyone went off it. We tried to record it a couple more times for OK Computer, probably about 3 times for Kid A and another 3 times for Hail to the Thief. The spark that eventually created the version of Nude that we know and love today was actually a new bass line that Colin Greenwood had come up with. Colin had written his new bass line, which transformed Nude from something very straight into something that had much more of a rhythmic flow. We recorded it 3 times, and the final version is what you hear today. There's a similar story behind Radiohead's track True Love Waits, which was originally recorded in 1995. Much like Nude, the band first tried recording True Love Waits for OK Computer, but was never happy with the result. The band tried re-recording the song on multiple occasions over the next 20 years, but it took until 2016's Moon-Shaped Pool for the track to be finally released on an album. In 1962, jazz pianist Herbie Hancock released his debut solo album, Taking Off, and its lead single, Watermelon Man, became a big hit. Watermelon Man is a fairly standard 16-bar blues with a catchy melody and a great groove. This song and album was the starting point of a very successful career in jazz for Herbie, with him joining Miles Davis's band the very next year. But despite his success in jazz music, by 1973, Herbie was looking to expand beyond jazz. He'd been listening to a lot of funk music like James Brown and Sly Stone, and decided to take his jazz stylings into the world of funk. He started working on a new album with a band called Headhunters, and one of the tracks on that album would be a heavily reworked version of his old debut hit Watermelon Man. This new version retained the original melody and chord progression, but completely swapped out the original jazz quintet arrangement for a selection of synthesizers, Rhodes keyboard, electric bass, and funky drum grooves. The only real structural change to the song was the addition of this new B section, which actually happens to be a great example of the lick. And of course, the other ear-catching addition to this version of Watermelon Man is the intro and outro sections, created by percussionist Bill Summers. The unusual flute-like sound is actually Bill Summers playing a beer bottle, but he isn't just blowing across it, he's actually playing it like a pygmy hindawoo. The hindawoo is a small flute instrument used by the pygmy people of the Central African Republic. As explained in this clip, the distinctive sound we hear at the start of Watermelon Man is created using a particular vocal technique.
It's a bamboo flute playing only one note. That's the only note you can get out of that flute. But the pygmies, who are the inventors of this flute, are clever people. The flute says something like, and you reply to the flute by saying,
This funky reimagining of Watermelon Man was pioneering in the way that it fused the styles of jazz, funk, and African pygmy music. But as you'll see from this interview clip, not everyone was a fan of Herbie's new direction.
You were criticized for that change.
Oh, yeah. Fortunately, I had learned so much from Miles Davis prior to that about, being able to stand up for what you believe in but that's the only way you can really respect yourself. And I had to be true to my own convictions.
Herbie Hancock is an artist who has evolved and adapted during his career in music, and these two versions of Watermelon Man perfectly illustrate that evolution. With all of the examples we've looked at so far, these songs have been re-recorded because the artist was either not happy with the original recording or felt like there was something new they could bring to the song. But now we're going to look at a few examples where songs have been re-recorded, not for artistic reasons, but for legal reasons because of copyright and ownership issues. Typically, when an artist records with a record label, those recordings, those master recordings, are controlled and owned by the record label. After all, it's the record label who has invested money in making those recordings, so they want to be able to make sure that they can get a return on that investment. Of course, what sometimes happens is that the artist and the record label have a disagreement, have a falling out, and then who controls the original masters becomes quite a contentious issue. and sometimes artists have become so frustrated by the situation that they've actually decided to re-record their entire back catalogue. This is exactly what Taylor Swift is in the process of doing at the moment. The master recordings of her first 6 albums are owned by a record executive called Scooter Braun, and this has meant that Swift has often actually been blocked from using her own recordings. So in protest, Swift is now re-recording these albums from scratch. She's already recorded and released the first 2, and as you can hear, these new versions are ultimately straight recreations of the originals. Swift isn't trying to put a new spin or angle on these versions. They are ultimately just subtly updated sound-alikes designed to replace the originals. A similar example to this is the Righteous Brothers version of Unchained Melody. The Righteous Brothers version of Unchained Melody, recorded in 1965, featured prominently in the 1990 film Ghost. Thanks to the film's success, there was a sudden renewed interest in the song, and people really wanted to buy a copy of it. But of course, in 1990, you couldn't just buy this track on iTunes or stream it on Spotify. You had to go to a physical record store and purchase a CD tape or vinyl. And the thing is with physical record stores is that they can't physically stock every single recording ever made. Particularly a song recorded in 1965, they may not have that in stock anymore. But of course that's not really a common issue. What would normally happen is if an old song had a new resurgence of demand, the record label would reissue that single and then new versions of the song could be manufactured and sold in record stores. The problem was, the rights to the original 1965 master version of the song were tied up in such a way that it could only be reissued as a 45 RPM vinyl record, a format that by 1990 wasn't particularly popular anymore. So to allow for this track to be reissued as a CD or a cassette, which were the prominent formats at the time, the Righteous Brothers actually had to re-record the track from scratch. This new version is very similar, but the lush string arrangements of the original has been replaced by a synth-based backing instead, and the new vocal recording, performed by a now 50-year-old Bobby Hatfield, doesn't quite capture the same level of magic as the original 1965 version.
Still more.
As I said, at the time the song was a big hit and was being played a lot on the radio, but it was the original 1965 version that was being played on the radio. So when people went to the record store and bought this new re-recorded version, I can't help but think they might have been a bit disappointed when they got home and put it on. Let me know in the comments if you can think of any other examples of artists re-recording their own songs. And as always, a massive thanks goes to everyone who supports me on Patreon, including the names you see on screen right now, and Andre Sainz Diaja, Andy Deacon, Andrew Brown, Andrew Sussman, Austin Barrett, Austin Russell, Bob McKinstry, Whitney Parker, Cameron Orvilla, Colin Aiken, Chris Cabal, Christopher Ryan, David Rivers, Donald Howard, Dr. Darren Wicks, Elena Skorchenko, Eugene Leroy, FD Hodor, Greg Kubowski, Ilamola Tona, Hamish Brocklebank, Hernick Kutcher, Hugo Miller, Ivan Pang, Jake Fisher, James Ko, J.A. Kokensparger, John Dye, Josh Sanderlin, Justin Vigor, Lee Lauritsen, Mark Ziegenhagen, Max O'Keefe, Melody Composer Squared, Melanie Schoner, Michael Vivian, Nancy Gillard, Nathan Lawrence, Nathaniel Park, Paul Middleton, Paul Muller, Paul Pazel, Peter Dunphy, Richard Bride, Roger Clay, John Kennedy, Steve Daly, Stephen Lazaro, Tim Beaker, Homer Aharoni, Trisha Adams, Tim Payne, Victor Levy, Vidad Flowers, Vladimir Kodakov, Volti, and Waylon Fairbanks.